What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? It's your main man, Stoney the Great, and I am back with a treat for y'all. If you've been subscribed or following me for a while, you may have seen my short form series called Everything Missing from the Michael movie. Basically, I went through every single part of the film and filled in all the gaps that the movie just skipped over. And y'all love the series so much, and I really appreciate that. So today, I'm going to give you a full, long version of everything they missed in the Michael movie in chronological order. If you thought the short form was cool, then I think you might really love the long form. So sit back, relax, and let's get into it. Oh yeah, and if you're new here, welcome to the channel. First of all, drop a comment, hit me with a like and a subscribe. And for all my day ones, welcome back, gang. So the movie covered the years from 1966 all the way to 1988, but there were quite a few things that they skipped over, and I mean very important things that got skipped over. So in this video, I'm not gonna really touch on the Jackson 5 stuff that much because that is a whole nother beast that I will have to do more research and take on later. For now, we're just going to talk about adult Michael, and that starts off in 1978. So in the movie, when it transitioned over to adult Michael, it dropped us off right before he started making Off the Wall. And as we all know, Quincy Jones produced that record. The problem with that is they didn't even tell you how Quincy Jones got there, because in the movie, Quincy Jones was barely in the movie. He was kind of like a side character, and the movie kind of made it seem like he wasn't as important as he really was. But if you're a true Michael Jackson fan, then you know that Michael and Quincy went together like milk and cereal back in the day. Now, one very important thing that the movie did not show you was a little project that Michael did before Off the Wall. And honestly, had it not been for this project, there would have been no Off the Wall, there would have been no Thriller, and there wouldn't have been no Bad. And that project was The Wiz. The Wiz came out in 1978, and it was the black version of The Wizard of Oz. And that movie starred Diana Ross. Diana Ross played Dorothy. That leads me to another fun fact. Diana Ross actually was a part of this movie. She was going to be played by Cat Graham, and they had to remove multiple scenes with Cat Graham's version of Diana Ross because Diana Ross did not want to be represented in this movie for some legal reasons. Now, some of those legal reasons could be the fact that a lot of people have accused her of grooming Michael Jackson because she is 14 years his senior. She was around him since he was a child, and as he got older, you can start to see their relationship dynamic change a little bit. It started to look a little romantic. Now, some people speculate that Michael was the one who had all the feelings for Diana, and Diana kind of just led him on a little bit, but we're not 100% sure. I'm not 100% sure. I don't think anybody can be 100% sure, but one thing that is for certain though, Michael Jackson had legitimate feelings for Diana Ross. And when she got casted to play Dorothy in The Wiz, she handpicked Michael to play the Scarecrow. And it was during the making of The Wiz where Michael Jackson and Quincy Jones started to form a relationship. And this is also around the time that Michael really wanted to venture off from his family and go solo. Now granted, Michael had already had 2 solo records before Off the Wall, but those were basically just Jackson 5 adjacent records. They didn't really showcase Michael as a solo artist, because if you go back and listen to those songs, they literally just sound like Jackson 5 songs. That's why nobody ever really considers Music and Me and Sincerely Michael as his first 2 actual solo records. Now, around the time that he made The Wiz, another thing that the movie didn't show you is that Michael wasn't even living at Havenhurst at the time. He was actually living in New York City by himself without his family. The only person who lived with him, I think, was his sister LaToya. This is also around the time that Michael was going to Studio 54 a lot, and Studio 54 was this big club back in the day, and it was sensational. The footage of Studio 54 looks crazy. I just wish I had a time machine so I can go back and just turn up one night in that damn place. And yeah, surprisingly, Mr. Shy, reserved, reclusive Michael Jackson was one of the main people at Studio 54 dancing his ass off.
I like the atmosphere of Studio 54. I've been to a lot of discotheques and I don't like them.
What's the difference?
But unfortunately, once again, a lot of those Studio 54 scenes included Diana Ross, and they couldn't use them. But around this time, Michael and Quincy got together for the Off the Wall album. They handcrafted a whole new sound. Michael wanted something a little bit more mature. He was trying his hardest to break away from that boy band thing that he had been a part of since the 60s. Now, what makes Off the Wall a very unique album is that Off the Wall, high key, was an album full of rebellion, because the album was recorded in 1978, released in 1979, and this marked the end of the disco era. In fact, some people even consider Off the Wall to be the final curtain call for the disco genre. Even the album's very last song, which is called Burn This Disco Out, is basically everybody saying goodbye to the era. So Michael putting out a disco record when disco was starting to be a thing of the past was a risk. But This is Michael Jackson. Anything he touched turned to gold. Well, in this case, platinum. Actually, multi-platinum. This album went crazy. And finally, people started to see Michael as Michael and not just little Michael from the Jackson 5. But unfortunately, the movie didn't show any of what led up to Off the Wall. They just showed him making it. But there's so much history behind that album, and I really wish the movie showed that. But hey, since the movie didn't, that's what you got me for. Now, another thing that the movie did not show you was what happened between Off the Wall and Thriller. And that, in my opinion, was a huge disservice. Now, granted, I understand that it's a movie. It's not a documentary. You can't just put every goddamn thing in there. You do have to have a runtime. Even though I do think the movie could have been like 3 hours, 3.5 hours, I wouldn't have minded. So I do understand them skipping over certain things, but this, I'm sorry, bruh. Y'all should not have skipped this one because there is nothing legal about this one. So it's not like y'all had to abide by any kind of like legal obligations. Y'all could have put that in there, goddammit. But what people don't realize is that Thriller was high-key made out of spite, because as successful as Off the Wall was, unfortunately, it only got him 1 Grammy at the 1980 Grammys. As much heart and soul as he put into that album, as much time, as much creativity, he only walked away with 1 award. Now, for most people, that's good. I mean, hey, you won a Grammy for your first real solo record? That's impressive. But Michael was like, yeah, I'm used to awards. That ain't enough for me. And as a fellow Virgo and perfectionist myself, I gotta admit, I understand. Michael hooked back up with Quincy Jones with one goal in mind: to win more than just one punk ass Grammy. He recorded a bunch of demos. Some songs didn't even make the album. Some of those songs didn't even get released until the Thriller 40 re-release decades later. Songs like Carousel and Sunset Driver, which, by the way, are 2 awesome records that I really wish they made the album. There was even an early version of PYT that didn't make the album. His main goal with Thriller wasn't to just sell a bunch of records. It wasn't to just get a bunch of awards. It was to cross over into the mainstream. As big as Michael Jackson was at this time, he was still technically considered just another black artist. In fact, he was such a black artist that MTV wouldn't even play none of his music videos. And we're talking about Michael Jackson, bro. Now, any great album needs a lead single. And you would think that Michael Jackson, being, a part of the disco and funk era, that he would release, a upbeat disco funk type of lead single. But no. Michael was way too smart for that. He knew that going over into the mainstream meant he needed to get white people to listen to his album. So he did what any genius would do. He hooked up with a legendary white dude. And that white dude just so happened to be Paul McCartney. And Paul McCartney just so happened to be a part of the most famous white group in history, the Beatles. He and Paul McCartney did a duet called The Girl Is Mine, and he used that as the lead single for Thriller. And if you listen to Thriller, I really hope you have, because you shouldn't be here if you haven't, you'll notice that The Girl Is Mine doesn't even fit on the album sonically. Every song on that album fits, but The Girl Is Mine just kind of feels random. It wasn't random, it was all strategic. This isn't the first time that him and Paul McCartney made a song together, because Paul McCartney and Michael Jackson also have a duet on Paul McCartney's album called Say Say Say. And to be perfectly honest, I wish they switched, because Say 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 is fire. I do not like The Girl Is Mine that much. It's okay, but Say Say Say, chef kiss. But anyway, it worked. Him doing that duet with Paul McCartney made people want to listen to it. And by people, I meant white folks. Black folks was going to listen to it regardless. They've been rocking with him since the Jackson 5. So when the album came out, it hit the streets and everybody loved it. The songs were all amazing. It was a fairly short album, only had 9 songs, easily digestible, and the record started flying off the shelves, bro. Thriller was going so crazy that at one point during the 80s, they were selling 1 million copies a week. Bro, that's platinum a week for multiple weeks, bro. Then the second single from the album came out. That single was Billie Jean. But MTV was the main source for video entertainment. But unfortunately, Michael Jackson was black, and MTV didn't give a damn how good the music was. If you was a Negro, they wasn't playing you. But Michael Jackson, having so much star power, he ended up forcing his label head to blackmail MTV to get his music video played. And they did so by threatening MTV to pull every single white artist that was on the label off of their station. So Bruce Springsteen, no more videos. Bob Dylan, ain't no more music videos. We're talking some real heavy hitting people here, and MTV was about to be at a loss. So MTV said, all right, you got it. We'll play Michael. And when they played it, it became the most viewed video that MTV had ever aired, and they played it all the damn time. MTV basically became Michael Jackson television. So now Thriller is selling even more records than it was before. But it's not over with yet, because there's still another thing that happened, and that thing was Motown 25. Now, they did show Motown 25 in the movie, but let's be honest, they kind of just threw it in there as like a highlight. They didn't talk about the things that happened leading up to that show and what came after it. So here's a quick little breakdown of Motown 25. Motown 25 was a show that Berry Gordy, who was the owner of Motown, came up with. It was the 25-year anniversary to celebrate the label. So as a result, he wanted to bring back all of the legends that were on the label so they could celebrate their music. This included Diana Ross, Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder, the Jackson 5, and of course, Michael Jackson. Now, at this time, Michael, once again, as we all know, was trying to separate himself from his Jackson 5 and the Jacksons era. He wanted to be on his own. So he actually was not going to do the show. But there is no way you can do a Jacksons reunion without Michael Jackson, especially since they were bringing Jermaine back, who actually had stayed on Motown in 1975 when everybody else went on to Epic Records. So this was the first time that all 6 brothers would be performing together. This is a monumental moment. You can't do this without Michael. So Michael came up with an idea. He told Berry Gordy, hey, listen, I'll do it on one condition. At the end of my set with my brothers, you gotta let me perform Billie Jean by myself. Now, Berry Gordy wasn't against the idea of Michael having a solo set, but the problem was the song he wanted to perform was an Epic Records song. It wasn't a Motown song. But Michael refused to do it unless he could do that song. Berry Gordy sat back and thought about it and said, would people really watch this shit if there's no Michael? Probably not, right? So he said, all right, cool. I know you're going to bring in the views. I know you're going to bring in the ratings. I'll let you do your song. Michael said, all right, bet. And if you watch that Jackson 5 performance with Michael on that stage, he knew that once that set was over with, he was finna turn the hell up, because his energy during his performance with his brothers was insane. Then his brothers left the stage and Michael stayed up there by himself. He gave a little quick speech that went a little something like this.
I love those songs. Those were magic moments with all my brothers, including Jermaine. I like those songs a lot, but especially I like the new songs.
And then the beat dropped and he did his Billie Jean performance. And it was sensational. The crowd was going insane. And then he broke out a move that would solidify him as a superstar, and that was the moonwalk. Little funny thing that people don't know is that after this moment, Michael was actually backstage crying, because when he did his toe stand, he kind of stumbled a little bit and he thought he messed up, but then a little kid walked up to him and told him how great he was, and he just felt better about it. And they did kind of address that in the movie when Jafar said, I was supposed to stay on my toes longer, but they didn't really go too deep into it. Motown 25 was an absolute success, but there was something that was about to happen because of Motown 25, and it had a little something to do with my boy Joe Jackson and Don King. And this is when we enter the Victory era, and boy, does this shit get messy. After Motown 25, there was a whole lot of hype for not just Michael Jackson, but also the Jackson brothers as a whole. Everybody was excited to see all 6 brothers together, because again, this never happened before. Because remember, the Jackson 5, before they became the Jacksons, was Michael, Jermaine, Tito, Marlon, and Jackie. But in 1975, when Jermaine stayed on Motown and everybody else went over to Epic Records, they became the Jacksons. Jacksons replaced Jermaine with Randy. This is the first time that all 6 brothers were able to perform and record together. As a result, they came up with something called the Victory album. But Michael wasn't really rocking with that project because he had just dropped Thriller. He wanted to do his own solo Thriller tour, which he so deserved. But instead, family obligations, he got forced into recording this album that he didn't even want to record. And if you've listened to the Victory album, Michael is barely even on the damn thing. He has one solo song, a duet with Jermaine called Torture, which by the way is the best song on the album, and he has a duet with Mick Jagger called State of Shock, which actually ended up being a hit single. It was the most unorganized Jackson's album of all time. It was not a collaborative effort at all. The brothers didn't record not a single song in the studio together, and it really felt like a compilation album featuring solo songs from each brother with a few collabs between each of them. It just wasn't a cohesive album at all. The album that they dropped in 1980 called Triumph, that one was way better than Victory. As a matter of fact, Triumph is another thing that they skipped in the movie. Because do y'all remember in the trailer when Joe Jackson was first talking about this tour and Michael said this?
I need to think.
I told you what to think.
See, originally, I thought that he was talking about the Victory tour when he said I need to think. In actuality, he was talking about the Triumph tour, because Triumph came out 1 year after Off the Wall, and Michael wanted the tour for Off the Wall too, but he couldn't because Joe made him do the Triumph tour. Triumph is the album that has everybody's favorite song on there, Heartbreak Hotel. Heartbreak Hotel was actually supposed to be performed in the movie. It was recorded, but for some reason they took it out. I'm so tired of hearing about the stuff that they took out of this movie. I swear the director's cut is going to be like 4.5 hours long. Naturally, of course, when it was time for the Victory Tour, Michael did not want to do that. Joe Jackson and Don King had this whole scheme planned out. Mind you, Don King was a boxing promoter, and he was a known scammer. He wasn't really a good businessman, and he had never done anything in the music industry before. But Michael, having so much loyalty to his family, he didn't want to let them down. And in order to help fund and promote the Victory Tour, Don King came up with the idea of the Jacksons collaborating with Pepsi. Michael didn't even drink soda, let alone Pepsi. And Pepsi was actually a struggling brand. One of the first things they did with Pepsi was a Pepsi commercial. Pepsi commercial in 1984 is unfortunately where Michael Jackson experienced his third-degree burns to his scalp. And I think the scariest thing about the Pepsi incident was that it marked the literal halfway point of Michael Jackson's life, because the same amount of years, months, weeks, and days that passed from his birth up until the Pepsi incident was the same amount of years, months, weeks, and days that passed until he died. That was literally 50% of his life, bro. Easily the creepiest Michael Jackson fact of all time. The Pepsi incident happened early in 1984. The Victory Tour started that summer of 1984. So Michael was on stage 6 months after that incident. And there's even some concert footage where you can see he's not healed up there. And the promotion for the Victory Tour was a hot ass mess, bro. First of all, tickets for most top acts at the time was like $15, $20 max. Bro, the Victory Tour tickets were going for $30 to $40, and most people in the beginning had to buy them in a set of 4. And you couldn't just go to a ticket booth and buy tickets. You had to use a mail-in system to request tickets. And a lot of people didn't even hear back from the mail-in system. So many fans felt isolated because they couldn't afford them. The mail-in system just wasn't working. And unfortunately, with Michael Jackson being the biggest name attached to this tour, everybody blamed him. If the ticket prices were too high, it was Michael's fault. If you couldn't get in through the mail system, that was Michael's fault too. So Michael started getting hit with allegations of being a sellout and forgetting where he came from. It was just a hot ass mess, bro. Fans were losing money. It just wasn't a good look. And this was all Don King and Joe Jackson's fault. But guess who cleaned it up? Michael. Michael went public and called for the end of the mail-in system and requested that fans be able to buy tickets normally at a normal price. He then turned around and said that all the money that he makes from the Victory Tour, that he'll be donating it to charity. So all the money he made from that tour, he didn't pocket any of it. He donated all of it to charity. He also donated all the money that he got from Pepsi because of the incident. A 7-figure donation was given to him, and then he donated it to the burn center for the hospital he was at. So at this point, Mike is just getting his ass whooped left and right for free. But hey, with an album like Thriller, you don't need no damn money for real. You know what I'm saying? Them royalties was going crazy. Then the Victory Tour started on July 6th of 1984. Normally, when you do a tour for an album, you kind of promote that album, you know, by like performing the songs from the album. That ain't what happened with the Victory Tour. The album dropped July 2nd, 1984, and they started the tour 4 days after that. Not a single song from the Victory album was performed on that tour. The reason for that is that Michael didn't want to show up to rehearsals for none of the songs. But if you listen to the Victory album, then you would know that Michael was barely even on the damn thing. So what would there have even been to rehearse? I mean, what besides Torture and the song he did with Mick Jagger? As a result, the Victory Tour basically just ended up being the Thriller Tour featuring the Jackson 5. That whole set list was full of off-the-wall songs, Thriller songs, Jackson 5 songs, a few of Jermaine's solo songs, and a couple of the songs they did during the Jacksons era. As big of a tour as this was, it only lasted 6 months, and it concluded in December of 1984. And that's when Michael got on stage and said, "Yeah, I ain't doing this shit no more." On the very last night of the Victory Tour, Michael Jackson got on stage, grabbed that microphone, and told the whole crowd, against his family's knowledge, that this is the last time that they'll be on tour together.
Listen up. I'd like to say, this is our last and final tour. I think this is our farewell tour. Y'all been wonderful. It's been a long 20 years, and we love you all.
In the movie, it pretty much went from that part, and it skipped all the way to 1988. In the middle of the Bad Tour. Now, that's a long ass jump, bro. That's like 4 years. This is the part of the video Well, I fill in the gaps that the movie skipped over in that section. First up, 1985. Let's go. Now, Michael Jackson was pretty quiet around this time. He didn't really do much in 85. First thing he did was he linked up with Lionel Richie and they wrote the song We Are the World. As we all know, that song was a huge charity event, raised about $60 million, and it featured Michael Jackson, Stevie Wonder, Diana Ross, and like 30 plus other major artists of the 80s. Fun fact, Prince was supposed to be on that song, but Prince said, hell no, y'all can leave me out of that. And I don't know if you've seen the behind the scenes footage of the making of We Are the World, but it is absolutely hilarious.
Just believe there's no way we can fall. Just believe there's no way we can fall.
This was also the year that Michael Jackson became more than just a pop star. He became a music mogul because this is the year that he purchased ATV Publishing, which gave him control of over 250 plus Beatles songs, and it gave him power over 4,000 other songs. And some of these songs were some of the most licensed songs in history. So every time those songs got used for background music in a movie, got used for a commercial, got sampled, anything, Michael got a cut of that. And this move made him one of the most powerful artists in the music industry, if not the most powerful. And the real funny story about this is that he actually got this idea from Paul McCartney. Back when they were working on The Girl Is Mine and Say, Paul McCartney was teaching Michael Jackson about publishing and ownership. Paul McCartney in 85 put in a bid to own that catalog, but Michael Jackson ended up outbidding him. So he got the game from Paul and then beat Paul at the game that he taught him. Naturally, of course, this is when Michael Jackson put a target on his back. The industry was not rocking with that. This is a black dude who is like the most powerful artist in the industry. No. This ain't going down. 1985 was kind of a quiet year for Michael. He didn't really do too much, but most of what he did was behind the scenes. And the same thing goes for 1986. Around this time, Michael Jackson actually got diagnosed with lupus, amongst a bunch of other health problems that he was having. Unfortunately, that burn incident somehow flared up a lot of other issues that he was having. It flared up his lupus. It actually made his vitiligo really kick into gear, because this was the year that Michael started to look a little funny. Lupus gives you something called moon face when you're going through treatment, makes your face look real puffy and swole, and Mike just looked kind of odd. Like he just looked like he just wasn't his healthy self. And this kind of made him stay further out of the light. He became more of a recluse. This is when those weird allegations from the media started happening, saying that he was sleeping in a hyperbolic time chamber or something like that, and saying that he like slept with animals, and saying that he took hormones to make himself sound like a girl. And this was when the term wacko jacko started to be used. 1986 actually wasn't as quiet as it may have seemed, because again, everything he was doing was behind the scenes. Back in 85 is when he actually filmed the Captain EO short film. That short film was released in 1986, and Captain EO featured the very first song that would be featured on the Bad album, because we all know this song, right? That song, released on the Bad album in 1987, was actually recorded in 1985 and was featured on Captain EO. 1986 is also when Michael Jackson recorded the Bad short film. That short film was written by Richard Price and was directed by Martin Scorsese, and it was the acting debut for Wesley Snipes. And the whole history behind this music video is pretty cool in my opinion. It was basically Michael Jackson kind of reestablishing himself as a black artist and letting the black community know that, hey, you know, I may be over here parlaying with these white folks, you know, going pop and, you know, being mainstream, but don't forget, I'm still down, I'm still bad, I'm still, you know what I'm saying, I'm still a brother, don't worry about it, you know what I'm saying, I know I look a little funny, but I'm still me, you feel me? And then the following year in 1987 is when the album finally came out. Michael's entire motivation with the Bad album was to outdo Thriller. As crazy as that fucking sounds, because how in the hell can you outdo Thriller? And even though on the charts Bad didn't sell as much as Thriller, Bad was nowhere near a flop. In fact, it broke a record that Thriller didn't even break, because Bad was the very first album in history to have 5 #1 singles off one album. He had a whole new look, you know, this was the late 80s. He wasn't rocking the sequin jackets and the tuxedos no more. It was all about buckles, zippers, dark colors, real rock star, punk, heavy metal kind of thing, hip hop inspired, all of that. It was a whole new vibe for Michael. As great as he was, Michael was still a student of the game. He knew he had to adapt no matter how great he was. And his ability to adapt is what made him so great. And also with the Bad album, he knew that he would finally get what he wanted with Thriller and what he wanted with Off the Wall, which was his first solo tour. Michael Jackson had been in the game since he was 5 years old, and it took him almost until he was 30 years old to finally get his own solo tour. And if you listen to the Bad album, you can tell that it was produced to be in concert. The production was louder, the instrumentation was much more bolder. Even the way the album runs in the track list, it sounds like a concert, and that's exactly what he got. Many people see Michael Jackson's Bad era as the peak of Michael Jackson. because this is when he finally was like fully in his MJ bag, you know what I mean? His dance moves were sharper than they ever been. His energy was different. He was fully free. No more family obligations. It was all about him. And his Bad tour performances across the board are some of his best on-stage performances you will ever see. The Bad tour lasted from 1987 all the way until January of 1989. And the movie dropped us off right in the middle of 1988. Did you know that Michael didn't win a single freaking Grammy for the Bad album? He was nominated for like 4 of them and didn't win none of them. Absolute snub fest. I'll have to talk about that separately because that technically ain't a part of the movie. Yeah, man, that pretty much concludes it. This long ass yap session basically just filled in all of the gaps in the Michael movie. 1978 all the way until 1988. Everything that they did not include in the movie, I included it for you. So hopefully you learned something today. And for those of my fellow moonwalkers who already knew this, I'm glad you tuned in and watched it anyway. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes everything they missed in the Michael movie in chronological order. Appreciate y'all for rocking with me through this long ass video. If you don't follow me on my other platforms, hit me up, Stony the Great, on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, drop a comment and a like, and I'll be seeing you soon. Y'all stay tuned and y'all be easy.